Well, I'm Ralph Howard. I was drafted in January of 1952. And
How old were you?
I am currently 86 years old.
How old were you when you were drafted?
I was 23 when I was drafted.
And what branch was that, did you say?
187th Airborne Regimental Combat Team. That was a regiment out of the 11th Airborne Division, which was based at Camp Campbell, Kentucky.
Tell me a little bit, what were you doing around the time that you were drafted?
I was in Alaska, working in a cold storage, processing halibut fish.
So you were fishing and processing fish, and you got word that, well,
And my wife was there, she worked in the hospital.
so what was her reaction whenever she found out you were being drafted?
Well, we hadn't been drafted then. I was A1,
Mm-hmm.
and I went back to the States after the season, and they weren't drafting anybody right then. So I worked at Union Carbide for about a year or so, and then they finally drafted me. They drafted me in January of 1952. I was up in Alaska in 1950 when the war started.
Oh, I see. Did you know what was going on in Korea? Did you know there was a war going on?
Yes, I know there was a war going on.
Mhm.
But I was A1 girl.
Well, what does that mean? Can you please tell the audience?
Huh?
Will you please tell the audience what that means?
That means I was going to be drafted as soon as I came up to draft. My number come up the draft board. They didn't draft you unless you were 1A.
Okay. So did you know where Korea was?
I don't know at that time whether I knew where it was or not. I'd heard about it though, of course, on the news and everything.
Yeah. So whenever you were drafted, what was your reaction? Were you nervous? I mean, what was going through your head?
Well, I was working and making pretty good money, and I didn't want to go, just like anybody. But I got my notice, and we got the letter in the mail, and it said, "Greetings from the President of the United States. Your friends and neighbors have selected you to serve for them in the Army of the United States. You're to report in Jackson County Armory on 8 o'clock on the 14th of January.
What a
For
letter.
induction." And you go to get inducted, you take a little go-to-hell bag with underwear or something in it, and that's about all you take, because you're not going to be wearing civilian clothes much longer. And they did give us a physical, and as soon as the physical was over, they took us out, put us on a train, and went to Fort Meade, Maryland. And there they issued us clothes, and they cut all of our hair off. And then the next day or so, we took in-depth test, aptitude test, that the Army gave everybody to see how smart she was, I think. And after that, then they put me on a train and sent me back to Kentucky to Breckenridge, Kentucky, which is the old 101st Airborne training camp, and where they stayed. So I took my training at an airborne facility. It hadn't been an airborne facility. It had a 101st Airborne Museum there. And I went through all the training there. And then toward the end of the training, being a draftee, they came up from Benning, sent some people up there, and they showed us a bunch of movies about paratroopers and stuff. They were looking for people to volunteer for airborne. They were having trouble getting enough volunteers, I guess. Anyhow, I didn't listen to it very, very well until right at the end. They said, "Well, there's only one regiment airborne overseas." And of course, I was married. I didn't want to go over there. But when I heard that, I just stuck my hand up. And then we had to take a physical, and we had to take a physical fitness test to qualify, they picked a picture on well you did and how healthy you were. And at the end of training, well, I had a choice of going to leadership training or going airborne. I chose airborne.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I was going to leadership training because I was a acting corporal. I was a temporary corporal all through our basic training. So I had about 3 days of travel time to get to Benning. And my wife, I had a car and my wife picked me up. And she went with me, went to Benning and got an apartment and boarded. And 3 weeks later, I was paratrooper.
You're a paratrooper.
Yes.
Ah.
And I found out after the first week's training, or during the first week's training, what it took to get your wings. If it didn't kill you, you got your wings.
Tell me a little bit about what that is. Tell the audience.
You want to know about the training?
Yeah, sure. Tell me about it.
Well, when you get there and you walk into the area the first day, that's the last walking you do for a while. You can walk in the barracks, but when you hit the barracks door in the morning, you had to be running. When you come out the door, you was doing push-ups. And you ran to formation and came to stop in formation, and then when they turned to formation to take you down to the training area, you took the right face and you double timed in formation to the training area. And we got there, it was a sawdust pit, a rather large pit, and you took your field jacket off with bare chest, and you got out there and it was sawdust in the pit, and you did the Army dozen physical fitnesses. And of course, when you get through, you got sawdust all over you, so you put your shirt back on. And they run you 3 miles to the next training cycle.
Oh, it's gotta be itchy.
And it was.
Mm-hmm.
And it was intensely that way.
Mm-hmm.
And then we did PLF platforms, which is a low platform where you had a harness on and you learned to do an exit from the aircraft and make a landing.
Mm-hmm.
It's called a PLF, parachute landing fall. And then and from there, on the first week, you went to 34-foot towers. They had towers, 34-foot towers. Stairs went up like this to the top of the tower. And you went up in line up to the tower, and there they hooked you into a parachute. They had a harness on it. They hooked a pulley on a cable outside the tower. And then you had they told you how to exit the aircraft. Mm-hmm. and when they tapped you, you exited out and you fell about 50 foot. And then that harness hooked you on the cable and you slid down the cable to another sawdust pit.
Ah, sounds fun.
To test your reaction to that, you had a reserve on, a dummy reserve, and it had a ripcord handle on it. And if you're supposed to, after you got your opening shock, when you jumped, you're supposed to look up and check your canopy to see if there's blown panels in it or malfunctions in it. And if you did, you had to pull a reserve if it's too bad. And so to train you that in a tower, they took a piece of parachute silk, camouflage silk, and they had a little clip on it. And if they hook you up, every once in a while, they put that on your harness. And it's up above your head on your harness. And then you went out when you got the opening shock, and when you come to the end of it, if you didn't look up and check for that, and you went all the way to the pit without noticing it, then you were standing underneath the tower and you didn't see it. You didn't see those people anymore. They didn't want somebody that didn't do what they were told.
Tell me a little bit about like your actual job. So you're as a paratrooper, you had to jump out of airplanes. So tell me what the purpose of that was.
Well, it was they usually they jumped in to fight, but they did in Korea. They would move you from one regiment to the other wherever you were needed. But And when they first got there, they fought with the Marines. When my outfit first got there, that was in '51, they fought with the Marines when they took Incheon Landing to go in there and cut off the supply route to people where they had them cornered down Pusan. And so MacArthur took the Marines in there and they fought to Seoul, to free Seoul, and when they did, they cut off the main supply route to the south. And so the troops down there, the enemy couldn't get to supplies, so they had to retreat. And that's one reason they did it.
Where were you being stationed at in Korea?
Huh?
Where were you being stationed at in Korea? You said you were moving around a lot, so.
They took the outfit out the 11th and they put them on a ship and shipped them over there, and they were supposed to get there and they came into Pusan. They were supposed to get there. They were supposed to make a jump into Kempo airfield and take the airfield by airborne assault. But the ship ran into a hurricane on the way over there, and we didn't get to Pusan in time to nuke that, because by the time we got there, the Marines had already taken Kempo, and so they flew us into Kempo. And after we were in Kempo and got organized, then they put us in, and we fought with the Marines to take Seoul. And then somewhere in there, after we took Seoul, then they put us back out to Kempo, where our planes were. And then they planned that Sukchon-Sinchon jump later on. And we made that. The first combat jump was Sukchon-Sinchon. And Sukchon-Sinchon was up above Pyongyang, the capital. And the reason we made that jump was, one reason was to cut the Reds off that were retreating and take prisoners, and also to stop a train that was, the intelligence found out were going north that had a bunch of GI prisoners on it, going to prison camps.
How are you to stop a train?
Well, we had airplanes that stopped the train if we needed to, but anyhow, when they saw us jumping the train, they apparently stopped the train and took the prisoners out and shot them. And we got the train. We had people go through the bodies, and I think they got 26 people that weren't killed out of the whole bunch.
And out of how many?
About 26 out of the whole trainload we found alive. They shot them.
How many do you think were probably in the whole train load?
Huh?
How many do you think were in the whole train load?
I have no idea. Don't have any idea, but and when we jumped, and they had a tank outfit and some troops that were coming north to relieve us. And as soon as they got there and took over, then well, after we took it, we also held the capital too, Pyongyang, for a while. And they took over from us, and when they did, they were fighting over to the inland from there, through the mountains, and we walked and traveled over through the mountains to another area and went on fighting. And they pulled them out. I did this when they pulled them out. I looked back at my notes and found out, but they went from there down to Daegu when they pulled them out of fighting. And the reason they went down to Daegu was I think they were going to try to make another airborne assault. And I think that's when they did the assault at Monsigny. We made a combat jump in Monsigny, and that Monsigny jump was a lot later than the first one. That's after the troops had come down and we were pushing them back again. And after the Monsigny fight and everything, we wound up down in the interior fighting with the Marines. We moved from one regiment to the other, helping where we were needed. But those two jumps were the only combat jump we made. Now, we did make a jump later on. That was, they pulled us out and took us back to Daegu again offline. And that was in '52. And the point of take us out and take them out there, they were planning a combat jump on the behind the high ground where we were stationed on the front lines. Is a mountain called Old Papasan. And they had us in a barbed wire compound down there at K2. It's a F-86 base. And they had a tent up and a mock of the landscape and stuff, and general was coming, going, and everything, and pan and jump. And at that time, the peace talks heated up, and so they decided that it might disturb the peace talks. So they canceled the jump, and all of them flew back except me. And I got the duty of going back with a convoy of our vehicles to the tide flat on the east coast of Korea there somewhere, and loaded on an LST. I was guarding the records, the company records, going back to Japan, and we got back, of course, after everybody else. And we took a LST from that tide flat.
And what's an LST?
Landing ship tank. We had all our vehicles loaded on it. And we slept on the deck. Some of us, they had beds down on in the sides of the LST below that some people stayed, but I stayed on deck all the time. It's about a 2 days trip back to Oita, Japan, which is about 10 miles from Beppu, Japan, and that's where our base camp was, Beppu, Japan. Mm-hmm. And Beppu was south and east of Ashia Air Force Base. And we had another part of our outfit, our artillery stuff was across the island at a place called Fukuoka. And so we had our regiment separated that much, but when our planes that carried us were the 315 troop carriers, they had 119 aircraft. And so if we moved, we just went up there and they would fly us where we were going to go. And we also had C-46s at Brady Field, and they had C-47s over at Fukuoka.
What's the difference between the two aircrafts?
Huh?
What's the difference between the two aircrafts, the C-46 and C-47?
The 47 is the one, it's a DC-3 in civilian life. It used to be a passenger plane. The DC-3 is the one that dropped all the troops into Normandy. And they didn't have the 119s on the Normandy drop, I think, but they developed those later. Mm-hmm. But then, I don't know, they might have been there when they made the jump into Belgium, but that was sometime after Normandy. They also made it, I think it was the 82nd also made a jump on Sicily during the African compound.
Okay.
And then they moved them back into England with the 101st and 82nd and prepared them for the assault on D-Day. I had a cousin that was in the 82nd Airborne that made the jump into Normandy.
Really?
And my commander in Korea made the jump into Normandy. My Brigadier General, General Westmoreland, made the jump into Normandy. We had a lot of, I had a man that was a corporal in my company, in my squad, that was made the jump into Sicily, made the jump into Normandy, made the jump into Belgium. He fought the Battle of the Bulge, and he made 2 combat jumps in Korea. He had 5 combat jumps to his credit, and I stayed close to him.
So how dangerous was your job? I mean, were you ever scared to,
Well, in the chute open, it wasn't bad. It's like going to a circus or something. Mm-hmm. You got on the ground, you're going to go do it again, but up until you jump, while you're sitting there sweating it out. And early on in training, the guy advised me, said, we got to check our chutes when we drew them. We'd feel them, and each chute had a little booklet in the back of it that had the date it was repacked and who did it. And the people that worked in the rigging crews to pack those things, every so often, they'd take them into where they stored them, and they'd have to pick a chute, one that they packed and had to jump it. So they kept them honest.
Wow. Do you think, is that still true today, do you think?
Huh?
Do you think that's still true today?
I probably so, if they reckon. See, when they first started out, you had to pack your own chutes. But during the Korean War, they did away with the individual packing. Where we took our training, they had packing tables to pack chutes there.
That's funny.
And they used to pack their own chutes. I had a story, one guy, they had 3 or 4 people packing their chutes together, you know, on a table. And they were, the last ones that packed their chutes at the table had to sweep and clean up the whole place. So these guys were racing another group, you know, to get them packed, and
But efficiently.
they took shortcuts. They just balled it up and stuffed it there and laced it in.
Oh my goodness, so not too good of an idea.
It worked though.
Tell me a little bit about your living conditions as far as what were you being fed? How are your sleeping arrangements?
Well, we got fed good in Garrison. Where you short on feeds is on the trip over in the ship. You eat good on the ship starting out, but there's a lot of people on the ship, and then before you landed, the food got pretty scarce and pretty bad. But in Korea, we had each outfit had a head company that was behind the lines, and they had food back there for the people that weren't combat, that weren't in combat. You know, the generals back there at the headquarters and stuff. But so they had and in Korea, when we were on line, General Westmoreland tried to get a hot meal up to the front every day, depending on what the action was. So the people in the trenches were getting a hot meal once a day. Otherwise, you read AC rations, which was a standard can of food like corned beef hash. They had beanie weenies, and they had one that was sausage, and boy, you needed to heat that because you opened it up and there was white grease in it. And then they had a hamburger one, and sea rations were pretty good. I like sea rations.
Really?
And we had these, and when you jumped after the troops were signed there at Cole, down at Seoul, there were some children around at BZ when we were jumping, after we jumped, got over there. And there's little girls around there that couldn't get the food. Yeah, we were throwing them rations, bread rations and stuff like that, and they were fighting over them. And this little girl wasn't doing much good, and she had her mama son with her. And so I called her over there, and me and one of the rigging guys, we fed her 2 cans of corned beef hash. And she sat on my lap for a while while she's eating. I don't know how she got it down, but she was just a little thing. All she had on was an old ragged T-shirt. Nothing but a T-shirt. She didn't have shoes. She didn't have underwear or nothing. The old mama sat there and ate we threw her a bread ration. She ate a bread ration. She feeding her. But we got sure, that was one full kid when we got through with her.
Is that common to see starving children and families in Korea?
No, where we jumped there at Seoul, it was after the truce was signed.
Okay.
And that's why they were around. Up front, if the civilian got within 3 miles or 4 miles of the front, they got arrested and taken back and put in a concentration camp. And made a president. They're not supposed to be up there. So you didn't have anything but soldiers up there.
How much were you getting paid for your duty?
Not enough.
Was it enough
Well,
to...
I don't know what the standard pay was then, it wasn't very much, but we, Airborne got $50 more a month for hazardous duty pay. And up on line, when the people were fighting on the front, and then after combat, the soldiers got $45 combat pay. And that always made the what we call leg outfit made them mad because we getting more money than they were.
Was it enough to support you though, and to send money back home to your wife?
Well, your wife got allotment off of your pay. You didn't get all your pay.
Mhm.
They sent a lot of it home. And this is Sierra Air Force Base where our planes were stationed right here.
Wow.
And with this rifle and everything here, I drew.
You drew this?
Yeah, right here.
You're a handsome young lad.
I had hair then. This is when we first got to Seoul in '53 when we were back into Korea, and the guy with me there got killed in Vietnam. That's Ponder Sin. The guy got hit in the chest with a '76 Rolls rifle round, and it had a boot with a foot in it and some entrails and stuff. And they couldn't find a dog tag, so we had 3 people to sign an affidavit he got hit so they could notify the next 10. This is the LST when we were leaving the second time out of Incheon, going back down the Yellow River back to Japan.
Did the war impact you in any way after returning home? Your participation, did it reflect you? Or not reflect you, just impact you?
Well, you just try to forget everything and go ahead and do what you're gonna do. I went to work and back to my job at Carbide. In fact, when I got out of service a week later, I was down here in Texas. My boss that I was working for when I left, he came down here with Carbide, and he told me when I come back and see him that they had my job for me. So I came down and went to work. And you work to keep things off your mind.
Have you been back to Korea?
No, I wouldn't know it if I went back now. They gave us a medal here, I don't know how long, quite a while ago, that for our service over there. They called it Ambassador of Freedom Medal, and a bunch of us here at our local chapter got it. And they gave us a book at that time that had a bunch of pictures of Korea during the war, and then at the end they had Korea now. And when I last saw Seoul and was going through it every day, the only thing that really wasn't damaged in the whole town was a pagoda that was downtown in Seoul, and I think it's still there, religious pagoda. And I wouldn't know it. The Capitol was gutted and everything, and I crossed the river on a pontoon bridge. All the bridges were in the water. You know, the engineer made a bridge and across the Han River, and now it looks like a city. I mean, a big city, and it is a big city. All the bridges, they got 4-lane roads. They got a road all the way from Seoul all the way down to the tip of Korea that's paved. All we had was gravel and mud roads.
Yeah.
There wasn't any paved. Well, they had some paved roads in Seoul, but that's the only thing that I saw in it, you know. But right at the end of the book, they had a picture that was made from a satellite of the Korean Peninsula, and you can tell what the 30th parallel is.
Yep, because one side's
Because
lit
the
up.
whole south end was lit.
Yep.
And the top, there's little light around Pyongyang in that area, and another place over the east of there. And that's about all the light you saw in North Korea. So that tells you how much Korea has, how far they've come since the war. And seeing that sort of makes, back then, you know, well, why am I fighting for this thing, you know? But seeing that and the way they have come up and everything, makes you feel more like it was worthwhile.
Well, sir, is there anything else that you'd like to share? Any other memories or stories, messages?
Well, I don't know whether it's done any good or not, but I've enjoyed talking to you.
I've enjoyed talking to you, and I really appreciate it.